Coming up on today's episode of Hit and Roll with returning guest Tim Walsh.
Blurt is now 30 years old, and Educational Insights, who makes the game now, has graciously said they would give a game away to a Hit and Roll viewer or listener. That's part of why I love the industry so much, is we make stuff that people play with one another, with their loved ones, and they get connected to them more. And it's a pretty cool job to have. Of course, if people knew how they came up with something that really ended up selling well, they would do it more often.
You're listening to Hit and Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. I'm artist, engineer, and game inventor, David Yakos.
And I'm game designer, Branson Faustini, and together we get to talk to the people who make the world of fun.
Fun, fun, fun.
So much fun.
Well, today's fun is brought to you by Mr. Tim Walsh. Hey, Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Tim has been on the show before, and if you didn't catch his episode, go back. You get to his backstory, how he became a toy or a game inventor, and all the amazing things that he's added to this industry. He's been inventing games for more than 30 years, games like Blurt, Tribond, Megamouth. He's an amazing man, a friend, and I just thankful to have you back here on Hit and Roll. So, for reals, thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Branson. This is great.
Tim, I'm really looking forward. I get to see you here in person in Chicago at ShyTag of People at Play. You ready for that?
I know. I'm so pumped. It's such a great show. I'm so proud of Mary and her team, and the fact that people listening to this will know that the TA just acquired her, and just a lot of exciting things happening with that. And I'm the chair of the advisory board for the Young Inventor Challenge, which is happening during ShyTag. So such a great show in Chicago. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, for us, it's like kind of the one place where we go and probably make the most deals for pitching our games to, because like the ratio of toy and game inventor relations people or toy and game scouts. I'm trying to rebrand it. I like game scout or toy scout better than inventor relations as far as a title. But the ratio of those professionals and the professional inventors, it's like, almost like 1-to-1. And so you've got so much 1-to-1 time with all the people that make the decisions at the game companies, which is kind of unparalleled.
Yeah, I remember. I've been in the industry for 35 years, and Toy Fair in New York, trying to pitch ideas there is very difficult because it's such a sales-focused show. That's the reason why people go there is to focus on sales. And when Pop came along, of course, it was ShyTag, and now it's People at Play. But you're right; it's just such an unusual opportunity to have one-on-one time with those scouts, as you call them. So for toy and game inventors, that's the show you got to go to.
For sure. And I guess like the young inventors, that's the thing that young inventors need to know about. And so if you're, and they've got to go, but do they have to be there in person? Like kids, tell us more about the Young Inventors Challenge. Because this year it's going to be too late for them to participate if they're not already, I'm guessing. But they can start working on next year's.
Yeah. But no, they can do it online. They don't have to submit their idea and pitch it in person in Chicago. The Chicago show is really the Young Inventor Challenge International Championship. And the Young Inventor Challenge happens throughout the year in schools, at summer camps, inside Astra toy stores. There's a lot of different ways that kids can get involved, but it's basically an international competition for ages 6 to 18. For kids, it's a chance to create a toy or a game. It could be a pet toy. We're pretty loose on exactly what category it could be in, but the idea of learning how to present your idea and putting it together, we walk them through step by step how to do it with other mentors, adults that take them through the program. And then, of course, like we were just saying, the show in Chicago, the International Championship for the Young Inventor Challenge, there's people there that judge the kids and watch them present their ideas. But it's a great way for kids to get mentorship, with other adults in the industry so it's just one of my highlights of the show for me is just to watch the creativity of these kids. And, even the public speaking aspect of it, a lot of kids get very nervous about presenting, and that's okay, because it's okay to be nervous. But if you want to be an inventor, you're going to have to learn how to pitch your ideas to toy companies, right? So it's just such a great life skill to be able to organize your thoughts and present them. So, and then we probably had, I think, 8 or 9 different toys and games that were invented by kids that have ended up getting licensed to toy companies and actually on the shelf of like Target. So the idea of being, a kid and having your product on the shelf of a major retailer is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So who's the Simon Cowell of the judging these kids that just sort of squashes their dreams and be like, sorry kids, stick to science. like,
I think we have got a good group of judges. We don't have too many Simons. But yeah, it's creative, the creative feedback and the constructive criticism. There is some of that too. Of course, all of us that are in the industry remember the first thing you ever invented probably isn't your best thing, right? So I love it when these kids come back, they present and then they'll come back with a new idea, or they'll take an idea that they had a few years ago and you see how far it's progressed. That's pretty cool to see too.
I love it. It's like kind of like science fair when they make like the little trifold presentations and they'll have their prototype and their little sales board, and they're out there peddling their idea just like, like they've seen the other, professional booths go, and it's like, hey, let me tell you about my new game. It is amazing.
It's funny how the buzz happens right away. Somebody, have you seen this dinosaur game or whatever? The word will get around quickly that there's one or two in particular that people love. So that's cool when you hear the buzzing amongst the industry peers talking about what games or what toys are really cool. You need to check it out. So
wasn't one of them a chicken poo bingo? Is that?
Yes, and there's a catastrophe one. This I won't go into too much detail, but she won the game of the year last year, and I think that game's going to end up getting licensed to a toy company. Knock on wood, we'll see. But she had the idea of shooting cats that shoot fur balls out of their mouth at Target. It was hilarious.
Catastrophe.
Catastrophe of hairballs, it was called.
Well, that Young Inventors Challenge is definitely a fun slice there at People of Play. It's cool that it's kind of the mentorship aspect of that, and that kids are getting that early chance. I didn't know that toy and game inventing was a possible job until I was an adult. I love that that's right there.
Even adults don't really think about the fact that, Candyland, someone had to invent it. And the idea of a game selling that many copies, I believe it's over 150 million copies of Candyland have been sold since 1949. The idea that Eleanor Abbott, the inventor of that game, is largely unknown and people don't know her name, even though she's got a 150 times platinum selling piece of pop culture. If you were a musician that sold that many records, you'd be, the Beatles, Garth Brooks, Whitney Houston, or Taylor Swift. It'd be a handful of performers have sold 150 million.
The Taylor Swift of board games. That's what I want to be.
Yeah.
That is a really good analogy, though, as far as not knowing the names. If you don't know Tim, as you get to know him, you find out he's like the walking encyclopedia of things in the play industry historically. It's just, I love how much knowledge you bring to just the history of the industry of play. No, it's awesome.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's fun. During COVID, I was consuming too much and I decided I need to create something new. So I launched a YouTube channel and I dive into the history of toys. I just finished one on Cootie, which was really fun because I love history, but I also just, it's a wonderful, wonderful industry. It really is. The people in it are amazing. And I really am a big play advocate. I think kids well, adults too, but kids really need play. And so I'm a big proponent of that. So it's fun to dig into some research and tell the stories of people that you probably haven't heard of, but you probably should.
Yeah, could you talk a bit about your YouTube channel and tell us stories that kind of come to mind as some of your favorites that you've covered?
Sure. Yeah, well, it's called Seize the Play. There it is, the giant logo behind me. But the series that I launched was Where's the Fun from? It's called. So basically, where do these things come from? Who invented them? So I just finished one on Cootie. As I mentioned, that was Herb Shopper, a mailman from Minnesota who was carving a wooden fishing lure in the shape of a bug, and he thought, "Oh, this may attract kids more than fish." And he came up with
just remove the hooks. Remove the hooks.
Building game. Yes, and I believe they've sold over 50 million Cootie games since 1949. That was Shopper Manufacturing, and then Shopper Toys, and they're known for Don't Break the Ice and Tumblebug and Ants in the Pants and a bunch of games which are now Hasbro games. But yeah, I interviewed the inventor of Jenga, Leslie Scott, who's a friend. I just had the distinct pleasure of interviewing Eddie Goldfarb, who is 103 and still inventing, has a game on the market called Forklift Frenzy as we speak. And of course, invented Kerplunk and Battling Tops and Stompers and so many classic toys and novelties. And it was great to hear his story. Yeah, I guess my favorite, the Lionel video was really fun to put together. That was really interesting to find old footage of Christmas. Was such a big part of Lionel's advertising. And of course, the classic train around the base of the Christmas tree. I touch on the folklore of that and just the evolution of that company and how Neil Young, the singer, came into that company and helped rescue it, so those sort of things. But yeah, it's such a fun thing to give credit to people that, are largely unknown for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because play is sort of frowned upon in Western culture. I think most educators know how important it is, but for some reason, and maybe it's an American thing where we're so focused on work that we don't think about the importance of play and toys. But the idea that you could, like Leslie Scott, our friend, who we're going to see at Shy Tag in a couple of weeks here, she invented Jenga, which is just, it's hard to put into words how successful that game has been and how many people have played it. So that was fun to interview her for the channel too.
That's why we do what we do. It's like getting some of those backstories it's so rewarding, and just some of these stories I just can't believe haven't been shared or told before. Again, the Taylor Swifts of the play industry.
Yeah, and the cultural impact too. I mean, part of the fun of watching people react to images of old toys is they go, I had one of those. I even forgot I had one of those until I saw the box, So it's fun for people to recapture their youth too.
Yeah, I was going back and looking at some of the old retro toys of the 80s and from my childhood, and like there's this nostalgic wave that just sort of hits you when you see some of these things, like even like it's like Teddy Ruxpin. Like I didn't have one, but just like the amount of commercials that were always on while I'm watching, G.I. Joe or something, like just instantly, like you flash back just from seeing some of those things to childhood. It's amazing how those things sort of sculpt us.
I remember I worked with a woman that chatting, she said she always wanted an Easy Bake Oven and she never got it. One year during her birthday, I decided to get her an Easy Bake Oven and she cried. She opened it and actually cried. And I was like, wow, I was kind of doing it as a joke, but she like really wanted an Easy Bake Oven. So we recapture our youth by going to eBay and finding these old things that we loved when we were kids.
And then we fill our offices and our homes with them.
Yes, we do. It's true.
So do you guys like have any nostalgic ones? Like, what's a nostalgic thing that brings you back to your childhood?
I wrote a book on the Whammo toy company called the Whammo Superbook, and part of the reason I wrote that book is because Super Ball for me was my go-to toy. You know, because we were a blue collar family, didn't have a lot of money, but whatever allowance I got. I had plenty of chores and not much allowance, but $1, you could buy a Super Ball. And I remember getting one and bouncing it over our house because the little cover, it showed it bouncing over a house. And I wanted to see if that really is that true? Can it really bounce over a house?
Is it
and
true?
I'm here to tell you that it can. It is true.
It's true.
So I had the pleasure of interviewing Norm Stingley, the inventor of Super Ball, for that book. He's no longer with us, but he was a chemist for the Bettis Rubber Company in the early 60s. And the first Super Ball he molded blew up because he didn't realize how much pressure was under, and he overfilled the mold. So when he went to open the mold, it just tore itself to pieces. But then he perfected it and he brought it to Whammo, and the rest is history, right? So he sent me an envelope with an old Super Ball. He was a gardener, and he went out into his backyard gardening. And what are the chances of the inventor of Super Ball digging up an old Super Ball? But he did.
I'm sure in his yard, the chances are high.
Yeah, well,
because that's like the toy we'd all lose, right? Because you'd go outside and you'd bounce it, and it would super bounce away, like into the bushes somewhere, over the fence, over the house.
Or it's the second bounce that's the problem. The first bounce, it picks up that speed, and then the second one,
and the spin, and it starts spinning in some unpredictable fashion where it's like, okay, now we've lost it.
I tore open that little brown envelope, and I pull out this mangled Super Ball from Norm Stingley, and I said, I don't know how he fit so much of my childhood in that envelope, but he did.
I was 10 in 2004. So that's my era of nostalgia.
Yeah, I had a job.
No, I was all Legos all the time, and like the board games. I don't know. It was like Star Wars Risk. It was right after I think it was right after like Attack of the Clones had come out. They released, I think it was Attack of the Clones. They released a new version of Star Wars Risk, and I remember playing that one a lot. I'm not a huge fan of Risk, but that was a fun game. But
yeah, it's interesting the things that bring us back. Let's talk nostalgia here a little bit, because you've been inventing games for 35 years, but 30 years ago this week, right? You had invented Blurt. So we're on the 30-year anniversary of that. Can we let's talk about this game that's older than Branson here? It's older than Branson by like 2 days.
It came out in '94, so this is the 30th year. But I actually invented the prototype in '91. I was down here in Florida, in Sarasota, and my new girlfriend was a teacher at a local school, and I went in to help her. And my job was very clear. I was supposed to read to the kids and keep them quiet while she took some other kids for end of school testing. And I remember distinctly these kids wanted nothing to do with me. They were third graders, so that would have put them around 8 years old. And every book I pulled off the shelf to try to read to them, they were like, we heard all these books before. They just wanted nothing to do with me. And I still don't know why, but I pulled a children's dictionary off the shelf, and I just opened it, and I said, okay, you'll check your vocabulary here. Well, what's the word for? And I pulled to the first page, the nut of an oak tree. And this kid said, oak nut. And I said, no, it's an acorn, but that's pretty funny. And I turned the page and I said, okay, here's another one. And I just started reading the definition slowly and letting them blurt out the words. And I remember the second one was the first meal of the day. And this kid goes, waffles. And I was like, well, I was looking for breakfast, but that's pretty funny. And it was like a light bulb went off. And it also showed me the power of play, because when I say that these kids wanted nothing to do with me, I mean, like, they did not want to sit still, and they were not listening and not happy. And then a second later, when we were just discovered this game, not only were they listening, but they were like literally on the edge of their seats, leaning forward, intently listening to me as I was reading these definitions slowly. And that became, I showed you before we started here, it became a game called Definition. So that is the prototype to Blurt that I created in, oops, I got to get it the right way, in 1991.
Look at that. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, you got to check out the YouTube there for the the prototype picture there, but it's pretty awesome. Is that like,
yes.
Did you design all that like in Paint, Microsoft Paint, or what?
Colored pencils.
Wow,
well, it's hand drawn.
It looks like graphics. That's crazy.
And then, that's what the board, there's the back of the box for those listening. You can't see this beautiful, oh my gosh, it's rough. But it worked. So basically what I teach these kids with the Young Inventor Challenge is you just need a functioning prototype that you can play with. So all the cards, and I'm really dating myself here because, of course, this was before computers were really prevalent, but these are like this is a handmade card I'm holding up here. So I literally print them and glue them on cards. But I remember we played the game with a bunch of friends and they had fun blurting out the answers. And so for kids, it teaches vocabulary, but for adults, it's a party game because 90% of the answers. It's just, will you blurt it first? And,
well, do one for us.
Okay, we'll play a little blurt here. All right, so you just have to blurt it out. But we'll do best 5 out of 7 here. Let's go.
Waffles.
A small flat piece of plastic used to pluck a guitar.
Pick,
David.
1 point.
There it is.
You're gonna have to move a little quicker.
Yeah.
1 point. A cloth covering for the foot.
Sock. Yes. It was either sock or foot underwear. I was torn.
Yes. A group of 12.
Dozen?
I think we're gonna have to go back to the reel. Let's see here. Yeah, I won that one.
Come on, Branson. You got to get one. A round ball with a map of the world on it.
Globe. I think his G came out before my G. He gets that one.
Chair. Used by a king or queen.
Throne.
Oh, that was a tie.
That was definitely a tie. That was like a D&D reference. He was on that one. He's like Game of Thrones. Check.
To secretly run away to get married.
Elope. Oh, I think you got that one.
I believe it's 3-3. This is the rubber match. Your entire collection of clothes.
Wardrobe.
You got it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
So that's Blurt is now 30 years old.
Oh, look at that. The 30th anniversary.
That's the new game. And we, Educational Insights, who makes the game now, has graciously said they would give a game away to a hidden role viewer or listener. So we'll have to do that.
Well, let's do that. Read one of the questions, and those that answer it correctly, we'll go ahead and put into a hat, draw it, let them know they won, and collect their information, and they can send them a game. But go ahead and why don't you give them one of the questions, and we'll get people to comment.
The blue side is a little bit harder than the red side, so we'll try the red side here. Heavy material used to control the rising of a balloon. Heavy material used to control the rising of a balloon.
And we can't say the answer. Yeah, I about blurted. So if you know the answer to that, put it in the comments. And
of the YouTube video.
Yeah, of the YouTube video, and we will go ahead and select a a winner there, get your information, and Educational Insights will send you the 30th anniversary edition. Thank you, Educational Insights and Tim, for that.
We are about at 1.3 million copies of Blurt sold since 1994. Crazy.
I know, like we kind of joke in the game industry, you've made it once your games start to hit the thrift store.
I got a letter from a guy, and it was great because he said, I just wanted to write to you to let you know I'm an architect in Houston. And when I was a kid growing up, my favorite game was Blurt. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm getting old when the person that loved Blurt as a kid is now an architect. So I guess when you've been selling something for 30 years, then you've got a couple generations at least. So that's pretty cool. But you're right. I have been in a number of Goodwill stores where I see some of my games.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've like texted you pictures of like Tribond and stuff. Whenever you see something like secondhand, be like, hey, here's a loved copy. Previously loved. Yeah. So you've got this prototype. I'm curious then, you've got your colored penciled prototype. It looks amazing, by the way, for a prototype. I've pitched and licensed much worse prototypes that eventually turn into games, but that looked great. What did you then do with that? So you had you finished substitute teaching with the third graders. Then what?
I did. Well, at the time, I had already invented Tribond with Dave Urich and Ed Musini, my partners with that game. So I was kind of thinking of games, and I knew immediately that the kids had so much fun that this has to be a game. Now, I didn't realize that it would be a party game for adults. I thought it was strictly going to be for kids. But I have to credit my wife because I called it Death Fun Mission, F-U-N, and I thought I was being so clever. And she's, being a teacher, of course, she said, you cannot make a game about words where you misspell a word in the title. You cannot do that. So she convinced me that I needed a better name. And I was shocked that Blurt was even available because at the time there was a game called Outburst out. People will remember Outburst. And I always thought, if you have an outburst, that's not a good thing. That's pretty negative. But if you blurt something out, often it's pretty funny. It's, maybe unintentional. But I was absolutely shocked when I heard back from my trademark attorney, and he said, yeah, Blurt's available. So I trademarked that back in '94. So that's been fun. And then in overseas, it looks like this. This is University Games outside of North America. They sell it around the world, and then Educational Insight sells it in North America. And very, very excited that Blurt has survived this long. It's pretty cool.
Oh, it's super cool.
That's fun.
It's iconic. It's cool when you are able to make an icon.
But you know what? I didn't answer your question. So Play Monster is a company that used to be called Patch Products, and I worked for them for 9 years because they were the printer for my friends and I who made Tribond. And when Tribond took off, they said, oh, do you have any other ideas? And I said, well, actually, I have this game called Blurt. So they ended up licensing that game for me, and I was working for them at the time. So they sold it for, I believe, 9 years, and then they sold the contract to Mattel, who had it for 2 years, I believe. And then the rights came back to me, and I was lucky enough to get Educational Insights excited about it, and they licensed it for me, I believe, in 2006, if I'm not mistaken, and they've had it ever since. But yeah, it's been a great ride, and I've heard from a lot of fans that have played it, and of course you can go on YouTube and see all these people playing it, and laughing with their friends, and that's part of why I love the industry so much, is we make stuff that people play with one another, with their loved ones, and they get connected to them more. And it's a pretty cool job to have.
Yeah, it's one of those like pinch me moments where when you're working on play and you're play testing a game for your day's work, you're like, wait a second, I'm working today.
Yeah, I get to do this for a living. Yeah, I'm actually EI. Said you should try to get on some podcasts, and you guys were generous enough to let me come back on and talk about Blurt, but I'm also doing this is an old dog trying a new trick. So I'm trying to do they're called duets. Now, Branson probably knows this. I don't know if you know it, David, but on TikTok, they're called duets. You make a video and then someone else can take your video and react to your video. So I'm making duets so that people can play Blurt on TikTok. So that stay tuned for that. That should be scary because I know nothing about TikTok.
You're so social. Look at you. I love it.
We'll see.
That's fun. So, Tim, do you have any advice for anyone in the industry who's either just getting started or just placed their first product? Like, what should they keep in mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, the biggest thing that I'm struck with is the fact that you need to have a lot of ideas, right? Because it's a fashion business. And a lot of times, I'm sure you guys are asked this too, because you guys are pros. How do you come up with a toy or a game? And of course, if people knew how they came up with something that really ended up selling well, they would do it more often. Because a lot of times it's just this crazy thing of timing and the fact that it reaches a certain tipping point where kids or, maybe it's a marketing thing that kind of catches fire. You just never know. It's just the secret sauce of our industry, right? So I encourage the kids with the Young Inventor Challenge to just keep inventing and coming up with new ideas because in some regards, it's a numbers game. The more you come up with, the more likely you will be to finally get one landed. But if you have one idea and you obsess over it for a long, long time, your odds of making that successful aren't as good as if you were to have 10 or 15 different ideas. So I think creative people have a lot of ideas in them. So I encourage people to keep trying and keep coming up with new things. And that's one of the great things about our industry is history shows that the next big toy or game is probably going to come from someone tinkering in their basement or messing around in their backyard. It's typically not the big toy and game companies for whatever reason. It's typically the outsiders that come up with the biggest hits. So I'm always excited to see what's going to be next.
Or excited to come up with what's next.
That's even better if you can come up with what's next.
Yeah, just that whole turn of coming up with ideas and ideas, I think it's just pay attention to the world around you because every little bit of the world is inspiration. Like everything can be, inspire something in another industry, something out of nature, whatever it might be. Like there's so much inspiration around us.
Well, and Blurt was, like I said, coming out of being in a classroom, just trying to be useful to my girlfriend, who I don't know if I mentioned, she's now my wife. So that was another happy story with Blurt. But yeah, my game Megamouth, I was in quick story. I was in Taiwan with a partner. And in the food store in Taiwan, even before COVID, they have shields that the people wear in the grocery store if they're handing out food. They have to have shields. And this young lady had this plexiglass shield resting on her chin and over her ear. And I was just looking at her thinking, if that lens was a magnifying glass, her mouth would look huge and that would be hysterical. And I through my friend who spoke Chinese, I got one of the masks from the store and brought it home. And that ended up being a game called Megamouth that went into Target and had a couple years where it did really well. But just paying attention inside a grocery store led to a game coming and going into Target. So to your point, David, yeah, inspiration could be anywhere.
Somehow I feel like everything I pick up, like, where's the game in this? Where's the game in this? It can exhaust some people, but it's definitely keeps us entertained, the inventing mind.
Well, and the analogy that I use is I love comedy, and I have a couple friends that are comedians, and they do it with jokes. They'll be in a grocery store line or they'll be out in the world and they're constantly looking for something that could be a joke, just like we're looking for, could that be a play item?
Everything could be a joke or a play item. This has been great getting to dive into this stuff with you again. You've always like a deep well of play information. Again, thanks for being here. But before we go,
we like to wrap up every episode by rolling the hidden roll die and asking a few rapid fire, actually not that rapid fire anymore, but a few randomized questions.
Yeah.
Let's see what your first question will be.
The lightning bolt. In this world of games, world of play, is there a category that just needs more? Like, what's an emerging trend that just needs to have more thought, more ideas around it?
Wow. Well, I've been impressed with what Patty Becker and Jonathan Becker have done with Whammo in pet toys. So Whammo's, I mentioned earlier, I wrote a book on Whammo. But the idea that they could take that legendary toy brand and bring it into the pet category was really pretty genius. So they've had a lot of success with Whammo branded pet toys, which is interesting. And when I look at, my own life with my daughter has a cat that she adores and my grandmother has a dog and the amount of money that people spend on their pets, I think that's an untapped category. And I know you, David, have a game coming out, or is out, where you play with your pet, which I think is just genius.
The dog's best friend game. It's where the dog is part of the game.
That's awesome.
With Westpaw, that's
everybody. You think about a dog when it raises its butt in the air and lowers itself and its tail's wagging. That is a classic play indicator. That's a dog indicating I'm ready to play. And we could go really deep on the benefits of play, but obviously animals play just like humans play. So it's cool that you came up with an idea where